Perhaps you're waiting for someone you really want to date one day, but for whatever reason, it's just not happening. Or maybe you really want to get back together with your ex. Whatever it may be, there are times in life where God is speaking in your heart and telling you to cut someone loose. So in this video, I'm going to talk about 3 signs that this is what God is saying to you. Number 1, if the Lord's already given you extra time to disprove what you sense He's been telling you, this is a sign He's saying now's the time to fully cut this relationship loose in your heart so you can move on with Him. God is so kind to us. He knows we're weak and that we struggle to accept what we sense Him actually saying in our hearts when we know this is something hard to hear. In kindness, God will often give you a season to almost disprove what you sense Him saying. Obviously, we're never supposed to disobey God, and God's never okay with us disobeying Him. But again, He does, in kindness, give us seasons to really clarify what we sense Him saying. So in the parable of the landowner and the vine dresser in Luke 13, 6 through 9, notice how Jesus shows the kindness of the landowner and the patience the landowner has with the vine dresser. And He told them this parable. A man had a fig tree planted in his vineyard, and he came seeking fruit on it and found none. And he said to the vine dresser, "Look, for 3 years now I have come seeking fruit on this fig tree, and I find none. Cut it down. Why should it use up the ground?" And he answered him, "Sir, let it alone this year also, until I dig around it and put on manure. Then, if it should bear fruit next year, well and good. But if not, you can cut it down." The landowner had already seen enough. He knew that this fig tree wasn't producing fruit, but the vine dresser was attached to this plant. He had been caring for it for years, and he just wanted a little more time to see if he could just do something to help this plant produce the fruit. And in kindness, the landowner actually granted the vine dresser this extra time. But if after this additional year of grace that the landowner gave to the vine dresser, and then the plant doesn't produce fruit, if the vine dresser doesn't obey and cut the tree down at that point, now he's going to be disobeying. In kindness, God may have granted you a season of extra time to see if there was just anything else you might be able to do to help this relationship bear godly fruit. God already knows the future, but sometimes He lets us be able to see what He already knows. If God has already given you that extra time, if you've already tried to make a connection with this person and it's just not working, and if you've done everything in your power to help this relationship produce godly fruit, but it's just not, this is hard to accept, but this is a sign God's telling you it's time to cut this relationship loose in your heart so you can move into God's will for your life. Number 2, if you opened up to this person but they didn't receive you, this is a sign God is telling you to cut them loose. Opening up to someone is an essential step if you want to create a biblical bond with them. If you're never vulnerable with this person that you have feelings for, usually nothing's going to happen between you two. And even if this relationship does start, you have to be progressively opening up more and more to each other so that you both know this relationship is growing and meaningful. It can be really hard when your vulnerability is not met with equal openness from this person that you're opening up to. Perhaps you worked up the courage and expressed interest in someone and they just completely shot you down. Or maybe your mutual interest was expressed at first, but now this person is just guarded and distant and they can't get past that initial interest and the relationship's just not growing. Or maybe you're in a serious relationship and you have been growing and opening up with each other, but then you get in a disagreement, the person gets mad, they break up with you, and they seem to move on from you quite easily, even though you're really struggling to move on from them. This is hard, but when you open up to someone and they reject you, this means that it's time to move on. Notice when Jesus sent out his disciples in Matthew 10, he told them to go openly share the gospel with the towns that they were going to go to. But then he said, if those towns don't receive you, leave that town and go somewhere else, shake the dust off from your feet. Likewise, don't endlessly wish that the facts were different about this person's response to your openness. Don't endlessly beg them and continually open up to them when they're not reciprocating that openness you're showing them. If you opened up to someone in some degree or some fashion or the other, and they didn't open up to you, this is a sign God's telling you to cut this person loose in your heart so you can move on with the Lord into new things that he does have for you. Number 3, if you know this old relationship and this old desire is sucking necessary emotional energy from you that you need to form a new bond with someone, this is a sign God's telling you to cut this person loose. Your heart only has so much emotional energy to give. Like an electrical power source, if you overload that source, you draw too much power from it and you plug too many things into it, eventually it's going to short out. And likewise, your heart will eventually have a breakdown if you're asking too much of it and you're pulling it in too many directions emotionally. Your heart has an emotional capacity limit, and when you pull it in too many emotional and relational directions, it's going to short out and break down. We can't let old, unfruitful relationships pull energy from our hearts that we need in order to have a new relationship with someone else. Notice what Jesus said in John 15, 1-2. I am the true vine, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit he takes away, and every branch that does bear fruit he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. If an old relationship, if an old feeling for someone isn't bearing fruit in your life, cut it loose. And if you're forming a new bond with someone else and you want it to grow even more, you have to cut off all those other things that might get in the way of that. Here's a playlist of previous videos I've done about moving on and how to stop thinking about someone in your past that you know you need to stop thinking about. If you enjoyed this video, consider subscribing so you don't miss the new content I'm posting every single week. I'm Mark from ApplyGodsWord.com. Until next time, God bless.